Depression comes from replaying the past, and anxiety comes from worrying about the future. And many would argue that finding peace of mind and happiness comes from being still, which requires us to get off the hamster wheel.
Welcome to our Happy Rainmakers video series where point one can make a difference. Today, I'm joined by Taryn Abrahams, who is the founder and president of Empowered Behavioral Services. Thank you so much for joining us today, Taryn.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so delighted to be here.
I'm really happy to have you because you're here to talk about pillar one, care for yourself. We always say that's the most important one because if you're not here, then you can't do any of the other pillars. So thank you so much.
It's a topic I'm really passionate about, so I'm excited to see where we go with this today, because I want to give some people some tangible things.
Terrific. That's what we love to hear. So you have a different way of looking at it. You talk about self-leadership.
Yes.
Tell us what that is and why it's such a crucial part of having a happy career in life.
Yeah, no, great question. And I think it's a topic we don't really think enough about. It's funny, we talk about leadership, but we don't talk about self-leadership, which in my opinion is the most important kind of leadership. Self-leadership is really, putting it very simply, understanding who we are. Connecting the mind and the body is really the first step to self-leadership. It's really about the ability to look in the mirror. Research shows that 95% of our life is spent in autopilot. We don't stop enough to reflect. Yet, everything we do in life is driven by how we feel. So understanding how we feel, how we view the world, how our worldview impacts how we show up to our harder situations becomes the pivotal starting point to understanding how to self-lead ourselves, especially through those harder times.
So someone who spends 95% of their time on autopilot, how would they get started on getting to know themselves well enough to employ self-leadership?
Great question. It starts with sometimes hitting the pause button. Because we are so busy, we don't have enough time to think and feel. Well, we're feeling, but we're not really tying the thoughts with the feelings together, right? We might notice we have a lot of physical stress. We might notice our body hurts when we wake up in the morning. We might notice that we're burnt out. We don't want to go to work the next day. We might wake up with Sunday night scaries Monday through Sunday, right? But we don't always stop to reflect on the why and where that's coming from. And there was something I heard many years ago that I want to share with your audience because it was such a light bulb moment for me. Depression comes from replaying the past, and anxiety comes from worrying about the future. And many would argue that finding peace of mind and happiness comes from being still, being in the now, right? Which requires us to get off the hamster wheel, right? And I think many of us, especially who are very driven, have a lot of goals that we've set for ourselves, sometimes don't spend enough time getting off of the hamster wheel to reflect on how we're feeling in the process of achieving our goals. And burnout, by and large, oftentimes comes from our inability to disconnect.
For any of our audience who says, well, I'm so busy, when am I going to have time to pause and reflect? Do we recommend they take some time away from the office? Do we recommend they work with a coach or a therapist? Does it work if you just do it over the weekend? Do you need a week off? Like, what can we do if we know we don't have enough self-awareness?
So I think it starts with making a choice to do something a little different than you did the day before. And that something different is different for each person. And that's where the self-leadership comes into play. That might be for some people, I don't know, not drinking wine every day after work and seeing where that puts you, right? Or maybe it's developing different sleep habits, right? Or maybe it's limiting your social media because you know, as much as you enjoy it, it has sometimes a little bit of a backlash or a negative impact on our mental health. It's about reflecting on how we feel and taking some form of action. And I know that sounds so simple and small, but it's profoundly impactful to do that.
How does somebody who's on the hamster wheel decide what to try?
A simple thing to start with today, and it's very powerful. The word is called reframing, right? Reframing is a scientifically proven technique to shift our well-being and our mental health. And it starts with becoming aware of our thoughts. Our thoughts have power. They have power over how we feel, and it has power over how we view the world. So reframing is really simply reflecting on how we view the world when we are faced with our toughest times, right? How do we respond to stress? Do we tend to see it as a glass half empty kind of experience, glass half full? Do we tend to build ourselves up when we're faced with adversity? Or do we tend to talk to ourselves in a way that's sometimes self-limiting? And what we start to find is when you make space to think a little bit and reflect, you start to identify some of those thinking patterns. How we speak to ourselves determines how we navigate the world. And then it's about challenging those thoughts and replacing them with something that's better self-serving, something that's more impactful or positive or empowering.
Well, that sounds like something that we can all benefit from. So thank you so much for being with us today. And I think that a lot of us might want to reach out to you and do a little bit of coaching. Thanks.
I'm happy to help. It can be a life changer.